In the icy northern reaches of the Arctic, the world's largest terrestrial predator hunts, survives, and rears its cubs. Ursus maritimus, the strikingly white polar bear, is one of the Northern Hemisphere's biggest treasures, literally and figuratively. The polar bear's evolutionary history, as well as its relationship with humans, can be traced back for thousands of years. Early humans would have interacted with this species as they first entered Eurasia and North America's coldest points, and the bear continues to survive amidst the horrors of climate change today. In today's video, we will be taking you up to the frozen north of our planet to meet the polar bear in all of its power and splendor. It's simultaneously one of the most beautiful and intimidating animals alive today, but ultimately, this animal needs our help more than ever. Let's dive into the natural history and biology of this huge carnivore, exploring how it lives, hunts, and struggles against the oncoming threat of human advancement in its icy home. The polar bear is not only the largest living species of bear, but the largest land carnivore alive today. This is an achievement that has been bestowed onto the bear relatively recently. Up until the end of the Pleistocene, the short-faced bears that lived across North America in the Ice Age were the largest. With these titans hunted to extinction, the polar bear stands tall as the king of the north. Male polar bears are larger than females, growing to 2 to 2.5 meters in length, or 6.5 to 8 feet, and can weigh anywhere between 300 to 800 kilograms, or between 650 to 1,700 pounds when fully grown. That's quite a substantial weight range, and with good reason. Polar bear's weight fluctuates throughout the course of a typical year as the animal purposefully gains weight to cope with the colder, darker winter months when food is less readily available. A bear preparing for winter can increase its weight by up to 50% in these tough times. And with Arctic temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees Celsius, or minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, on average in winter, this extra weight is a valuable resource to have. Unlike brown bears, hibernation isn't particularly common in polar bears, and it is only pregnant females that will shut down their bodies to sleep out the winter in this manner. Most bears are active year-round, despite the 24-hour darkness present in the Arctic Circle over the long winter months. That being said, they are more active in daylight and can traverse very large distances across the course of 24 hours, up to 7.5 miles in fact. Polar bears occupy territories that can be as large as 15,000 square miles, but ice floes can transport them even further. This is just one reason why polar bears are struggling to cope with the loss of the polar ice caps as the global temperature increases. In the wild, polar bears can typically live for anywhere between 25 to 30 years, and in the care of good zoos or sanctuaries, can exceed the age of 35. Females are usually pregnant for between 6 to 9 months and usually give birth in December to 1 to 3 cubs. Once born, bear cubs stay with their mother for anywhere between 2.5 to 3 years, where they will pick up all of the skills they need to function as a grown adult. In this time, the mother bear will help her cubs learn how to swim, establish a territory, cope with the cold temperatures of winter, and most importantly, hunt. It is reasonably rare to see these bears traveling with others, and adults will normally prefer to travel alone. They have, however, been known to form alliances on occasion when traveling. The larger males typically hold power over other bears when this happens, and can rule over small groups of congregating bears with impressive power and control. Studies in 2006 showed that polar bear/grizzly bear hybrids, although rare, can occur in captivity and in the wild. This is possible due to the close evolutionary relationship shared between the two species, and has been confirmed by DNA testing of wild specimens who have been hunted by humans in Canada. These unique hybrid animals are referred to by a number of names. Growler or Pizzly bear are the most common, but the term zebra bear has also been used in reference to the animal's unique whitish-brown coats. Wildlife officials in Canada have dubbed the name Nanulak onto the hybrids, a portmanteau of Nanook and Aklak, the Inuit names for polar bears and grizzly bears respectively. Osnabrück Zoo in Germany is one of the few wildlife parks to have bred polar grizzly bear hybrids when 2 cubs, a male and a female, were born in 2004. The bears were remarkable. They seemed to be an exact middle point between the 2 species visually. Smaller than purebred polar bears but larger than purebred grizzlies, these cubs had long necks and visible shoulder humps, with paws partially covered in fur and a unique facial structure resembling both bear species. The female bear, named Tips, was sadly shot by zoo security in November 2017 when she escaped from her exhibit. The polar bear is best known for its status as an apex predator. On average, they enjoy much more meat and fish than any other species of bear and have extremely energy-rich diets. This energy allows them to stay warm whilst travelling across long distances each day, vital for an animal living somewhere as inhospitable as the frozen north. While polar bears are keen hunters of fish, birds, reindeer and even whales, their favourite food, by a long way, is seal meat. Several species share the Arctic with these bears, including spotted seals, ribbon seals, hooded seals, harbour seals, walruses, bearded seals and harp seals, but one species in particular is taken most commonly: the ringed seal. This small populous marine mammal, with a coat of dark blotches against light grey fur, is just right for a hungry bear. They're small enough to be overpowered by adult bears with ease when caught, whilst being large enough to fill the hunter's belly. To catch a seal, a polar bear will employ a range of strategies. The easiest method for a bear to make a kill is to pursue seals that have hauled themselves onto land or ice floes to rest or sleep. Seals will never stray too far from water, but are slow and ungainly on land, and a bear can buy itself valuable time by targeting those that are most vulnerable. If a seal isn't readily available to pursue on land, then a particularly patient bear might do well to seek out a breathing hole. This hunting method, known as the still hunting, sees a bear tracking down a seal breathing hole carved into the ice by the prey animal's sharp teeth. On large ice sheets that sit atop deep stretches of water where seals prefer to hunt for fish, holes like these are vital to ensure oxygen can still be obtained, and this need for oxygen can occasionally be deadly. The hungry bear will wait just out of sight, by the side of the hole, waiting for a seal to emerge for a breath. When this happens, the bear will spring into action, grabbing the seal by the head or neck and dragging it onto the ice, where it will proceed to dispatch and devour its catch. Polar bears are also famed for their excellent senses of smell, which can be used to seek out prey while on land. Seals rearing pups will often opt to do so in dens dug out into the snow and ice, where the young can be safe from predators and the elements. Polar bears have ingeniously found a way around this behaviour, however. Using their gigantic broad paws, the bears can rear up onto their hind legs and smash into seal dens with all of their body weight. Several attempts are usually enough to see the bear break right into the den and feed on the pup, or adult seal, within. Tactics like these won't always work when you're taking prey larger than a ringed seal though. When easy meals or carrion aren't available, polar bears will need to step up their game to hunt larger, more dangerous prey. Walruses, for example, are much larger pinnipeds than ringed seals and can inflict painful wounds with their long tusks. A polar bear, as well equipped of a hunter as it is, would do well to avoid large groups of these living walls of blubber. To tackle their defences, the bears have been observed mock swiping and charging at walrus herds in order to provoke them into charging back. The bears, more agile than the walruses, can then target the young walruses that have been separated from the adults. There have even been reports of bears picking up and tossing rocks or pieces of heavy ice at walruses to injure them before going in for the kill. Cetaceans, such as narwhals and belugas, are too large and fast in deep water for a bear to dive in and kill one. But in shallow coastal regions, the bears can attempt to corner them and strike. They utilize ambush tactics when hunting reindeer, attempting to conceal themselves against the snow or hiding in vegetation before attacking at the last moment, and have been known to dig into birds' nests to feed on their eggs. Remarkably, despite all of these hunting methods, less than 2% of all polar bear hunts are believed to be successful. As such, they need to spend a great deal of time searching or hunting for food. Polar bears share their territories with pesky Arctic foxes, small canids that will often follow the bears in order to pick up scraps when the apex predators make a kill. While bears with plenty of food can tolerate the presence of the foxes, a particularly hungry one will often swipe or charge at those who try and bite off more than they can chew. The bears will often leave behind the remains of prey items they cannot finish or transport back to their den, and in turn will inadvertently feed juveniles of the same species who perhaps aren't master hunters themselves. Polar bears have developed a wide range of adaptations over their evolutionary history that help them survive the extremely harsh conditions of the Arctic. As the most northerly bear species, they must endure long, dark winters, harsh temperatures, and howling winds. Polar bears' large sizes help them to defend against these conditions. By increasing their body mass and decreasing their overall surface area, heat can be retained and does not leave the body as fast as it would in a smaller, more slender animal. They reinforce this with 2 layers of thick white fur that can help conceal them from their prey and keep them warm, even in the harshest of winds. A thick layer of fatty blubber underneath their fur provides even greater insulation against the Arctic cold. Their ears also aid them in this respect, small and compact, with a covering of thick fur around the outside. Not much heat can escape them. Underneath all that fur, you might be surprised to learn that polar bears' skin is entirely black. Black absorbs much more heat than white, affording these animals yet another layer of resistance against the cold. Polar bears' paws are extremely broad and flat, which effectively act like snowshoes. By evenly distributing their weight across all 4 giant pads, they won't sink into the snow and are able to confidently stride across the ice without slipping. Tiny adhesive bumps, known as papillae, adorn the bottoms of their paws to help reinforce this. Moreover, their digits are webbed underneath all that fur. This helps the bears to paddle effortlessly through the waves when pursuing marine prey animals, such as seals or fish. In the water, the bears can reach up to 6 miles per hour and can swim for many hours at a time to get from one floating piece of ice to another. Their white fur is also naturally greasy, so after a swim, much of the water simply drips off of the animal without rendering the bear cold and heavy with seawater. To dry off entirely, a polar bear can shake its coat vigorously before rolling around in the snow as though it was a towel. A polar bear's face is more intricately adapted to life in the Arctic than it might look. They have significantly longer snouts than many other bear species, which helps them warm up the cold air before it enters their lungs, so as to not cause discomfort or long-term damage. It's not visible at a first glance, but these bears also have a kind of third eyelid, known as a nictitating membrane. This membrane can be used to conceal the eye during snowstorms or times of intense cold in order to protect the bear's vision, enabling it to continue hunting and navigating despite the inhospitable weather conditions. In the summer months, polar bears' homes will not constantly be covered by ice and snow, which in some areas melts to reveal grassy tundra that can stretch for miles in all directions. Polar bears living in the south of their range, where temperatures are significantly warmer in the summer, have actually been known to overheat when the weather gets too hot. Some regions, such as inland stretches of Canada, can even reach highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit in the height of summer. Out on the tundra, there is little cover from the hot sun in these months, and bears need to conserve their energy by resting more, taking shelter, and taking refreshing dips where they can. Everything about a polar bear's body is well equipped to survive extremely harsh cold, and so these animals really need to be aware of how much time they spend traveling or running in the summer. Polar bears, in their modern form, have been on our planet for around 120,000 years. That's longer than Homo sapiens. The first polar bears were sharing the tundra of Eurasia and the Americas with woolly mammoths long before we were. Polar bears and brown bears, the most widespread bear species, share a common ancestor, with the former adapting to the more extreme conditions of the far north, while the latter adapted to the woodlands and plains of Eurasia and North America. Climate change likely spurred the first polar bears to evolve and establish themselves in the Arctic. As the world became cooler in the Pleistocene, the bear's common ancestor could evolve to exploit the abundance of large prey animals up here. This evolution is thought to have taken place quite fast, a prime example of the abilities of animals to adapt to new conditions. Polar bears would have been coexisting with human beings since the very early days of our species. As humans migrated into colder climes, encounters with bears would have been commonplace. Eventually, humans crossing over the now sunken land bridge of Beringia between Siberia and Alaska would have become very familiar with the bears, perhaps incorporating them into their ancient cultural practices and spiritual beliefs. Humans living in Eurasia during the Middle Ages seem to have become unfamiliar with polar bears, viewing them as novel rarity in comparison to the black and brown bears that live in warmer climes, closer to human settlements. Scandinavian accounts from the 13th century, however, note the bears in a familiar manner, describing their supreme abilities as apex predators in the cold reaches of Greenland. As Europeans set out to discover the remainder of the world in the 15th and 16th centuries, their literature seems to reveal a world where polar bears were becoming more and more familiar. Living polar bears were captured and brought back to major cities to be housed in zoos and menageries, and dead specimens were acquired by collectors or museums to be taxidermied. The term white bear seems to have been in circulation until 1774, when the scientific name Ursus maritimus, or sea bear, was assigned to the polar bear by Commander C.J. Phipps. Binomial nomenclature, the process of identifying, categorizing, and assigning universal names to organisms, was introduced by Carl Linnaeus in 1754. Shortly after, polar bear appears to have come into circulation as the animal's common name, first used by Thomas Pennant, a Welsh naturalist, in 1771. Before C.J. Phipps issued the official scientific name for the polar bear as Ursus maritimus, Linnaeus himself had initially proposed the species to be a subspecies of brown bear, referring to the animal as Ursus maritimus albus major, arcticus, which translates to mostly white sea bear from the Arctic. Since Phipps named the bear as a distinct species, some naturalists have suggested that it should be placed in its own genus, Thalarctos, given its unique specializations to hypercarnivory and ocean-going lifestyle. Despite this, most scientists agree that Ursus is the suitable genus for the polar bear, given its close evolutionary relationship with the brown bear. It would not make much sense for two animals that can interbreed to be in entirely separate genera from a taxonomic point of view. Other scientists have suggested that the polar bear should be split up into a few subspecies, Ursus maritimus maritimus and Ursus maritimus marinus, given slight differences in populations. These have since been rejected, and there are no valid subspecies of polar bear today. This may not have been the case throughout prehistory, however, although this too is controversial. In 1964, Bjorn Curtin named a fossil subspecies of the bear, dubbing it Ursus maritimus tyrannus. The controversy arose due to the fact that the bear was named as a distinct genus from one lone ulnar bone from the animal's forelimb, a very small degree of fossil content to establish a new subspecies entirely. The ulna in question was 20% larger than the respective bones in modern polar bears, but the topic has been re-evaluated over time, and the bone is now thought to have belonged to a particularly large brown bear. Today, those wishing to see a wild polar bear should take care to do so safely and responsibly by taking part in tours offered by organizations with a focus on ecotourism. It was once widely believed that polar bears saw humans as a prey item and actively hunted them down. While it is true that polar bears have been recorded hunting and killing humans over the years, it's not right to say they actively seek them out as part of their diet. Polar bears typically tend to hunt animals that live widely in their territories and seem to be aware of the dangers presented by human beings. When they come into contact with humans, they have more than likely been attracted by the food waste we leave around our homes, which can lead to the bears becoming more confident around us. Very little will stop a hungry bear that thinks there is food around your home or on your person. And given their size and status as apex predators, there is little stopping them from overpowering those they target, especially if they are unarmed. Polar bear attacks on humans are more often than not a byproduct of the bears feeling threatened or becoming too confident when hungry. Between the years of 1870 and 2014, there have been 73 recorded attacks on humans by these huge bears, 20 of which proved to be lethal. Polar bear attacks are much rarer than you might think, given their intimidating position in the animal kingdom. But when they do happen, they quickly have the capacity to become extremely dangerous. One such example is an incident that took place on the Norwegian island of Svalbard in 2011, when 5 people came into contact with an adult bear near the Von Postbreen Glacier. The attack took place on a British school's Exploring Society trip, where the group, which contained both 17-year-old students and expedition leaders, encountered the bear whilst hiking around the glacier site, which is known to be home to the bears. While safety precautions were taken, the unpredictability of these wild carnivores sadly took the life of a student, Horatio Chappell, whilst 2 others were severely injured. A member of the group shot the bear in retaliation, killing it, and rescuers were called to retrieve the tourists. Those who were injured in the encounter were treated in the town of Tromsø, where they made an eventual recovery. Another more recent incident, in the August of 2024, saw 2 bears approach and kill a member of staff in a remote radar station in northern Nunavut, Canada. The man was not named by authorities but was working for Nasita Corporation, who maintained defensive radar sites in northern Canada. The bears wandered onto the site and grabbed the man, whose co-workers desperately attempted to defend him by shooting at the bears. Eventually, they managed to kill one, but the man had sadly lost his life by the time the second bear fled. A particularly tragic attack in January 2023 saw a woman, Summer Myomic, and her 1-year-old son, Clyde, mauled to death by a lone male polar bear in the southern outskirts of the coastal city of Wales, Alaska. Sadly, Summer was taking Clyde home from school when the bear approached them in the street in the midst of a snowstorm, which obscured Summer's view of the animal. As the bear attacked, staff from the school soon ran out to attempt to defend its victims, striking the carnivore with shovels, but soon had to retreat when they became targets themselves. The school was forced to enter a state of lockdown, with the bear just outside the perimeter, which came to an end when a nearby resident shot the bear dead. Unfortunately, by the time the bear was killed, Summer and her son had been mauled to death. This last attack was the subject of studies to determine exactly why the bear attacked the mother. Dr. Kimberly Beckman, a veterinarian working with the Alaska Department of the Fish and Game Division of Wildlife Conservation, took tissue samples from the dead bear to find out if there was anything that may have provoked the aggression in the animal. While initial speculation pointed to a neurological condition or brain parasite in the bear, this was soon debunked, and the animal's age and condition was determined to be a factor in why it brutally attacked Summer and her son. The bear was found to have been in poor physical condition and was reaching the end of its natural life. Exact conclusions were not drawn, but the bear may have been particularly desperate, perhaps having gone without food for a while. This may have forced the bear outside of its normal territory, traveling into a human settlement to search for something to eat. Polar bears use their immense fat reserves in desperate times when food cannot be obtained. and the condition of this bear suggests that it may have burned through much of its reserves before it was forced to enter human proximity. Sadly, the bear decided to attack humans to obtain food, and summer just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Despite being the largest terrestrial carnivore on the planet, polar bears need our help. The IUCN, or International Union for Conservation of Nature, lists the polar bear as vulnerable on their red list of endangered species. There are an estimated 22 to 31,000 bears left roaming the wilds today. And while more data is needed to determine the stability of this population, numbers could very well be decreasing. The range of habitat suitable for polar bears certainly is. Polar bears rely on sea ice to reach prey. Ice flows double up as resting points for bears as they travel through marine habitats looking for food, and can be vital in teaching young cubs to swim and hunt for themselves. The polar ice caps, however, are melting. Climate change due to human industrial activity is causing a mass reduction in sea ice, which in turn reduces the viable habitat space for bears to thrive in the Arctic. Hunting bears find themselves traveling a longer distance across the sea to reach the ice, and can occasionally tire completely while doing so, drowning in the process. Moreover, polar bears rely upon the sea ice to dig out cubbing dens to rear their young, which can become substantially colder when no ice or snow is present to insulate them. Large Arctic animals would also be vulnerable to parasites and bacteria that would flourish in warming waters, which could limit their life expectancy and, in extreme cases, ravage populations. The melting of the sea ice can sometimes force polar bears to travel inland to search for food. This brings the bears closer to human habitation, as they are attracted by the smell of food waste. Humans, not wanting to risk attack, will often shoot the bears as they get closer to buildings and homes. In the town of Churchill in Manitoba, Canada, authorities have come up with a temporary solution to this. They have constructed a polar bear holding facility, jokingly termed a polar bear jail, where bears can be safely isolated until the sea ice freezes over in colder parts of the year. While this solves the problem in the short term for the humans, further action is needed to make sure the bears don't need to enter human settlements in the long term. Between the years of 1870 and 2014, there have been 73 recorded attacks on humans by polar bears, 20 of which were fatal. While these animals are often dubbed as hunters of humans, we are not naturally on their menu, and they are no more dangerous to us than brown or black bears when the statistics are considered. Unfortunately, the problems don't stop there. Worryingly, oil and gas companies have begun to expand further into the Arctic in recent years, which will take more of a toll on the polar bear population as time goes on. As oil drilling and transportation is carried out, the risk of oil spills is greatly increased. Oil spills, as well as pesticides spread throughout towns and countryside in the Northern Hemisphere, have a catastrophic effect on the natural world, and the aquatic prey that polar bears rely on is in danger of coming into contact with toxic chemicals that quite literally choke the ecosystem from the bottom up. Fish can become contaminated by oil spills, which is in turn passed to the seals that feed upon them, which then works its way up to the polar bears that hunt the seals. If these chemicals don't poison the animals that come into contact with them to death, their reproductive abilities can be affected, resulting in a smaller concentration of bears in the Arctic going forward. A bear doesn't even have to eat contaminated food to be affected by oil spills and chemical waste. If a polar bear swims through a patch of seawater poisoned by an oil spill, the oil can cling to the bear's fur, which can have two equally deadly effects. Firstly, the bear's white fur may become stained black by the oil, which could harm the animal's ability to hunt, as they will be more easily spotted by their prey items. Secondly, oil that clings to a bear's fur reduces the insulation provided by their warm coat, and a bear may find itself unable to defend against the harsh winters and howling winds of the high Arctic. Polar bears are, without a doubt, one of the most spectacular carnivores on our planet. Perfectly adapted to live in the most extreme conditions, these bears are a staple of megafauna that survived the Ice Age and continue to thrive into the modern day. To ensure that this remains the case, however, action needs to be taken soon. While the duty rests primarily on the shoulders of governments and corporations to slow the onset of global warming, there are small steps we as the global population can take to help the bears before it's too late. Purchase renewable energy where you can to stop the widespread use of fossil fuels, which create harmful carbon dioxide emissions. Walk or use public transport where you can and recycle your electronics and batteries. If everyone takes a few steps to reduce their carbon footprint, there will be ice left for the polar bears to hunt and live amongst for generations to come.